I got to play a lot of Fallout 76, and it's safe to say that I think the game is really cool and quite a bit of fun. In that realm, it definitely surprised me and impressed me because I, like many others, was unsure exactly how a multiplayer BGS game would play, how an online Fallout would feel, and how well it would work solo. But I really enjoyed my time with the game, and I cannot wait to dive even deeper. You've probably seen some of my other videos where I cover the cool aspects of the game, take you through the early hours, and show you why this is going to be a really cool experience once it releases in about a month. But there's also some problems, and I want to highlight those today. Things that I think can and potentially need to be improved in order for this to live up to the franchise and live up to the hype and just help it achieve its status as a great game. Now, I want to note that these problems could resolve themselves in one of a couple of ways. First, they might fix themselves just by nature of playing the entire game. Some of these things may end up being not as big of an issue after you've experienced 60 levels of Fallout 76. They might be improved upon. They might be fixed as we go through beta and as we approach final release, or even post-release. Or they might be inherent issues with the design of Fallout 76, and they may just be things that we end up seeing in full reviews and end up plaguing the game throughout its life cycle, or maybe at least initially. So I'm not saying that these are permanent problems. I'm not saying that these are critiques that cannot be resolved, but here we go. And I'm going to start with some of the smaller ones before we get to sort of my bigger overall issue with Fallout 76. First off, the frames and the lag. Now, I call this a small issue, not because it has little impact on the experience. Frankly, it's pretty annoying, but I really trust that Bethesda will be able to get this right. They've got this build that we played for kind of early access. They've got the beta build, and then they've got the final build. And the point of the beta is to push and test, and they seem pretty darn confident that they'll be able to get this stuff straightened away by the time the game comes out. And I'm confident they can hit 30 frames per second, and it won't be that big of a problem. The loads were great. I think the world looked really good. The lag and some of the frame rate stuff that you've been seeing that I know bothered the heck out of a lot of early players, I trust they can get it done. The next one is maybe just a personal issue, maybe a personal complaint, and that is that I wish that the gear and the loot was a little more exciting. Now again, maybe this is something that as the game plays out, it resolves itself, because once you hit level 20, 30, you're getting really cool stuff. But after a while, getting these pipe weapons and some very basic armor, it didn't feel all that thrilling in those opening hours. Now, I know they have a framework they need to play within, because this is Fallout, this is post-apocalyptic, the aesthetic has been established. But for any of these games, whether you're talking like a Destiny or a Division, Fallout 76, one of my biggest problems has always been I don't find the loot all that exciting. And once you work your way through the main story, to me, loot and gear should be one of the main motivating factors to keep going. And so hopefully it gets a little creative, hopefully it gets a little crazy. Let's touch on that main story for a bit as well. It can feel like it is faded in the background and unimportant. Now, I personally like the audio log style. It's something I loved in BioShock, so I am fine, familiar, comfortable, and cozy with taking my story from the Overseer via these holotapes. But if you are playing with others, if you are attempting to progress as you listen, one, they're easily interruptible, they're accidentally interruptible, and there can be situations where there's just so much going on, it's almost impossible to pay attention to lore, story, and very detailed dialogue. So, I don't know that it's necessarily a problem, but you are going to have to be vigilant to digest the story specifically without it getting overlapped. And there's also just sort of the information overload issue where there's just so much on screen, there's so much on the minimap, and there are ways to mitigate that. You can turn off what you're tracking. Eventually you'll get very adjusted to what the different markers on the map mean. But at least early on, man, there were times where I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking at, and there is so much text and so much information on the screen, and I've got a holotape playing. What in the world? You know, you've got your multiplayer group life bars over here. You got your health and your food and your water and your AP. And you got your quests and you got the descriptors and you got the main quest and the side quest and the diamonds and the stars. And you got a radio station and you got it's just like at times it can be like, holy crap. It's something that you'll learn though. I think that one will be pretty quickly put to rest because you'll just get a grip on, okay, how much do I want on screen? What do the different markers mean? And you'll feel your way out. I also worry about what to do once you've explored all the areas. I feel like a lot of the fun of Fallout is coming upon these really well-crafted locations that have just, they ooze vibe, right? They ooze atmosphere. And you've got really cool ones in 76 that, you know, extend beyond just like the villages and the buildings and the power plants. You've got water parks and a Mothman museum and who knows what else lies, especially to the southern regions and the eastern regions where we didn't get. It looks like there's a lot of cool stuff based on the artistic interpretations, though, on the West Virginia map. But once you've gone to most/all of these areas, then what? Is the experience mostly based on daily, weekly challenges and world events? Is it your ragtag multiplayer crew running around? Do they find ways to incentivize your return to different areas? What is it about? And I don't know that I would worry that much about this in another style of online game, but I feel like so much of the Wasteland warrior experience is wandering, stumbling, experiencing, and exploring. And once that sense of wonder has been removed because you know it too well, like even though this world is very large, 4 times the size of Fallout 4, there's a lot to see, a lot to do. Because of the online nature and the fact that you will be sprinting from location to location and probably digesting this world at a faster pace than you have previously in the Fallout series, what happens and what is the sense of enjoyment after it's all uncovered? Now, there are nukes, and there are then those very difficult zones that occur because of said explosion, and the more difficult enemies and the better gear. And I'm sure there's a continuation of quests and things to do, but I do fear that it might dilute the experience tremendously once you've seen it all. But TBD on that one. Now, I think VATS is a little silly. I don't know that it's a problem because the normal shooting is good enough. VATS is just weird. Like, I'll use it occasionally for group management. It's not the VATS. It's not your brother's VATS. It's not the VATS you remember, and I think some people will find it to be almost useless. I don't know if that qualifies as a problem or more of just like an observation. But let's move to what my sort of biggest issue with the game is, and what I think is going to be the crux of how long this lasts and how much love fans look at 76 with after a couple of weeks or months. And that is what is the game? Because I feel like it treads the line very astutely, but maybe that's not a good thing. And I'm talking about the line between multiplayer and solo Fallout experience. I played most of this time with 76 solo, and I really liked it because it felt a lot like Fallout. But it felt like a not full Fallout because there's no NPCs. The story is being told via audio logs. And it's not the normal sort of progression. I guess a little bit, of okay, there's a main quest, but it just feels a bit different. There's nowhere near as much setup, right? There aren't characters to bounce off of. There aren't dialogue experiences, encounters to have. There are a lot of robots. But at that point, it's like maybe a diluted Fallout single-player type game. Still has the great wonder, still has the cool combat, still has the lore, the gear, the vibe. All of that is there. I don't take any issue with that. I think that's there in spades. The amazement when you come upon something creepy. The really nice moment when you first see the water park. Picking the perk cards is fantastic. I think the special system and the perk system this time around are really great. But if that's your take on this, it lacks some of the charm that a Fallout game would have, just given the omissions, right? So then if we say, okay, the focus here is actually on making this a multiplayer experience, which is what they've said and what seems to be the marketing of the game, well, now you're having this multiplayer Fallout where the wonder and sort of the eeriness is almost eradicated by the fact that you're goofing around with friends and playing around with a bunch of people. The combat is made far less daunting. And I almost brought up difficulty as a problem with the game because I didn't die once, but I must have been doing something way too right or way too wrong, because I read and see everyone else saying that survival was like a big factor. They died, they had to manage their systems and their health, their water, their food. I just didn't find it. It's very hard for me to tell you that the game is difficult or there are, these survival worries when I did not feel them. But I'm going to just say I'm an anomaly and go with the group here, that it is challenging and that I maybe just ran like a really weird perfect path. Anyhow, that difficulty is obviously mitigated by multiplayer and made more easy by having a bunch of people with you. Also, the story is going to be very hard for you to really take in and have it be meaningful in any capacity when you're running around with people. You got voice chat on, people are doing different things, clicking here, clicking there, shooting this, shooting that. What has already taken a backseat by nature of no NPCs and by an audio log storytelling style now just almost fades. I found it very difficult to interpret the story and really immerse myself in the world when I was wandering with others. Now, when I go back and rewatch my footage and they're not there and they're not talking and I can kind of focus, it feels pretty cool. And when I was solo, it sure felt better. But this is a game that I think for so long has, and a franchise that has traded on lore, atmosphere, and storytelling. It's weird to have all those things take a back seat. And then what comes forward are elements like base building and PvP that, frankly, I did not find that appealing at all. The base building, while some people who are nuts for that sort of thing will definitely get really into it, you have enough workbenches just strewn about the world. You have enough stashes. You don't really need to mess with any of that. And I get that you can as an optional want, and that it is mostly a desired-based game mechanic, not a necessity. But to me, it felt, dare I say, superfluous. The PvP, on the other hand, is something I think they need to find a better balance for. Because I initially loved the fact that they were trying to lower the annoyance and the just obnoxious nature of certain griefers and trolls, and they've come up with these ways to handle damage numbers and ways to, if you're not engaging in a PvP encounter, like it's just chip damage and they can't ruin your day, you don't lose a whole lot when you die in case someone does get the better of you. But it almost makes PvP feel, to me, inconsequential. And maybe my mind is just broken when it comes to what multiplayer is all about. And I will leave that as a possibility. But to me, if the reward is 32 caps and it costs 96 caps for a Med-X at a vending machine, I don't care to go and kill a murderer. Now, maybe if it's actually my server and I've actually been in this world for 20, 30 hours, I will feel invested in protecting the homestead. But at this point, I can only go based on what I've played and what I've experienced, and I didn't find PvP to be an intriguing option. I was chased around, and I've seen other channels mention that they were chased around when solo, and that might be a solo problem, that when you are by yourself, you become more a target for more aggressive squads. But if you don't engage, they are literally doing peanuts of damage to you, and it just becomes sort of this strange dance that you're being attacked, but you're not really being attacked. Your health meter sure doesn't seem to say it. It's so minimal, and eventually, in my experience, they grew tired and gave up. That really isn't like the greatest multiplayer encounter. Now, trading is kind of cool, and maybe more friendly engagements are where Fallout 76 will shine in terms of player interaction. And maybe you just need to have a lot of friends and play it with them, and that will take this all away. But I do find the line, the balance, the what the heck really does it end up being after a couple of weeks, a couple of months. I'm so curious to see player behavior. I'm so curious to see player experience. And I'm so curious to see player preference. Because for me, exploring the world and moving through the different locations, the quests, and getting new gear, finding new enemies, exploring, and coming upon crazy, scenarios and just wow moments, that's where I think I will derive most of my fun. There are others who will derive most of their fun from just goofing around, grouping up, getting through the content, reaching max level as quickly as possible. But for me, it feels like that then removes many of the elements of what make Fallout feel like Fallout, and I just don't know. So I think that it's interesting. It's taken such a single-player focused style and implemented, quote, normal 2018 multiplayer, and I don't know that they play all that nice together. It definitely works. Like, don't get me wrong. It definitely is enjoyable. I guess I'm just speaking more from a place of, will this achieve greatness? And that I don't know. Perhaps playing through the entire experience solves this conundrum for me, and I learn that the balance actually works out. And you can go solo, but you'll need multiplayer later on, and it becomes a very nice and well-orchestrated mixture. But I've seen it echoed that if the single-player solo style is not as strong as tried and true single-player solo Fallout, and the multiplayer is handicapped/hindered by the nature of it traditionally being a solo single-player, then you have this weird meeting in the middle that I hope doesn't feel like mediocrity over time. And this may come off as a critical and negative video, but again, I implore you to remember what I said at the beginning, which is that I think the game is very cool and I had a lot of fun. I'm allowed to say whatever I want about the game, but I genuinely did enjoy it, and I genuinely am looking forward to pouring a lot more into it, and I genuinely liked exploring and the typical traditional Fallout feels that you get when playing Fallout, you get when playing 76. I just have yet to see exactly how it all comes together, and I'm a bit worried about the mixture of multiplayer and single player and trying to balance those possibly leads to a really weird final result. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. I think a lot of the small problems can be resolved. I'm curious to see how the post-game and the end game and just all of that ends up working out, how long that main quest goes on for, and then what do you do after you've seen all the sites and played all the holotapes, and just that dilemma of like multiplayer, single player. How do you want to play it? What are you hoping for? I kind of thought that the multiplayer would feel more natural / be more overpowering, but in fact I felt much more compelled to go solo, which was appealing to me as a single player lover, but was also surprising for what the game is supposed to be. So let me know your takes in the comments down below, everybody. I'd love to hear them. I got a lot more Fallout 76 coming your way. I think it's one of the most interesting games of the year, and hopefully it ends up being one of the most enjoyable. Until that time, though, have a fantastic day. Thanks so much for watching. Drink so much chocolate, and we will see you all later.